You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. This episode is sponsored by Demand Derivatives, a startup futures exchange and clearinghouse trading the world's major assets in a creative new way. You already trade on an exchange. Here is your chance to own one. Before they approach large strategic partners for funding, the pioneering team at Demand Derivatives launched a crowdfunding portal so that regular traders have the chance to buy shares. Learn more and become a part of this revolutionary fintech project now at demandderivatives.com/crowdfunding. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we break down everything going on in the exploding world of crypto derivatives. We plan to talk about the impending and indeed current launch of ETH futures. Thought that would be the big story in the crypto world today. And don't worry, we'll get to that in a little bit. But once again, everything has been trumped, pun intended, by Musk and everything else going on in the world of crypto. We'll get to all that in a little bit. Of course, remember, you like what you hear, this show, anything else we do here on the network, make sure you keep rating and reviewing our content. It does help new folks continue to discover the content in these troubled times. Of course, for a lot of listeners of this program may be new to options. Make sure you're checking out our Options Playbook Radio, Options Bootcamp shows. Those are two shows really designed to get you up to speed in the world of options. So the things we're talking about here, like SKEW and open interest and volatility, all those concepts are foreign to you. Then check out those. We got a ton of episodes completely at your leisure. You can go back, check out the archives, and get yourself a little bit more familiar with what we're talking about. Get those questions and comments coming too. We do love to hear from you guys. And let's see who we're hearing from on the old program today. Joining us via the magical technology known as telephone, our old friend, Mr. Bill ULIVIERI from CENACLE Capital Management. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown for the first time in 2021, sir.
Hello. It's great to be back.
It's good to have you on. Nothing much really going on today, sir. So I guess we can probably end the show right now. What do you think?
Oh, no, let's not do that. This is a great opportunity to chat about all the things that we love.
All right, then. You twisted my arm. We'll do it. We'll head right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
right, everybody, let's do it. Let's dive into the world's leading crypto asset, aka Bitcoin. Break down all the madness, and indeed it is madness today, that is lighting up the world of crypto. Before we even get to the price action, Bill, if there were two trading assets out there that were dominating the mind share outside of the GameStop madness recently, outside of that, just in general, any day that ends in Y, there's two big names that you could think of that would dominate the mind share, Bitcoin and one other name out there. What do you think it would be? And how crazy would it be if the two of them got together, Bill?
If the two of them got together, well, the only names coming out are my favorite are Ethereum and what's happening with the new Merc contract that's launched, and DOGECOIN. If the two merge together, right? This the crazy dog that everybody seems to be talking about. I don't even know if the same speechless at that one.
That's true. Those two are crazy too. But I'm talking about in the regular trading world, of course, Tesla, which dominates all of the oxygen in the room. Usually the Tesla bulls out there talking it up to extreme levels, and Bitcoin. Tesla and Bitcoin are the two things that we seem to talk about pretty much hand in hand all the time. They're synonymous these days with volatility, also synonymous with a lot of aggressive price action to the upside. Also, a lot of the devotees, shall we say, of the two of them tend to overlap. The Venn diagrams of people who love Tesla and people who trade Bitcoin, they tend to overlap quite a bit. So there seems to be a lot of wiggle room between the two of them. Also, Mr. Musk out there seems to have discovered he can move a market or two when he tweets about it, and he seems to enjoy that. So he's up to it yet again, doing more than just tweeting this time. Right before the show here, listeners, today, Musk coming in and deciding that he's going to buy $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin through Tesla, of course, his electric vehicle company, and also going to start taking orders for Teslas in Bitcoin. Again, bringing those Venn diagrams together. And just that alone, just the whisper of Musk's love, and of course, buying up a fair bit of it as well out there, driving Bitcoin back up into the stratosphere. On our last show, Bitcoin was a little bit shy of 34,000, 33,800. And coming into today's show, it was 42,800, which puts it up about 8,900 handles. It's ticked up over 43,000 again now. So it's close to pretty much 9,000 handles at this point. All this, Mr. Bill, over the love and the intersection of all things Tesla and Bitcoin. So what are your thoughts about everyone's favorite tweeter, Mr. Musk, diving into the Bitcoin fray and indeed the frenzy of price action that has resulted, Mr. Bill?
I got to tell you, I mean, I've always been a contrarian, right? From the day I was doing a paper route when I was a kid. But really what we're saying here is that Tesla took taxpayer money, taxpayer cash, in the form of energy credits and regulatory credits that really most of Tesla revenue comes from, right? He takes these free energy credits that come from the U.S. government and sells those to other companies. So he's doing a regulatory arbitrage, which is the biggest moneymaker for Tesla. So he's taking those taxpayer funds and buying an unregulated cryptocurrency to undermine the U.S. dollar that the taxpayers use to fund the regulatory contracts he gets to arbitrage. So I'm telling you, from my perspective, and Mark, I think you'll really be able to appreciate this because you were on the trading floor during the, the .com bubble and burst. Do you remember when GE, General Electric, kind of got off their main core business of bringing good things to life, and then they began selling mortgages? And
they were a finance company, yes.
Right. And then General Motors had their GM financing, and they were making more money in financing than they did selling cars. And then Michael Dell took the company pension funds and sold downside leap puts options in Dell, like from 99 to right before the bubble burst. And you remember all these other, and Enron got off there. So I don't like this conversation. This is not healthy to me. So I am more negative on Tesla and Bitcoin right now just because of this stuff, because it just resonates and brings back all these memories for me of the right before the bubble burst in 2000. So that's where I'm at. I don't like it. I don't think this is healthy conversation. And I'm like the only one in my Twitter feed, my crypto Twitter feed, that is saying like anything strange about this. They're just so pumping this thing that I don't like that. I think we have to be more prudent here.
Yeah, Bill, you're outside the norm. You're going to get all the hodlers after you now, sir. Send your angry email to Bill at CENACLE Capital. But you're right. This does make me a little bit skittish, too. Obviously, Bitcoin can move and it is willy-nilly. It is volatile. But when it can trend up just this much, granted, he is buying it, so there is some price action going on there. And we know a few whales can do a lot to move Bitcoin. But this is more than just $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin changing hands. This is the Musk effect. And that, you're right, that is the prudent thing when you can see any sort of massive tradable asset can have this much of a move as a result of, what is effectively some surface level news. Are people really going to be putting a lot of Tesla orders in with Bitcoin? I'm sure there will be some. Is that enough to demonstrably move the asset almost 25% over the course of a week? Actually closer to 30%. That's more debatable. And that's kind of where we get into the crazy zone that the intersection of Tesla and Bitcoin brings us to. But of course, Bill, we're talking about lofty new levels north of 40,000 again. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on today as well is because you're one of the folks I know who's been dabbling in mining for some time. And I know back in some of your earlier appearances on the show, you were kind of lamenting the fact Bitcoin was languishing sub 10,000. It wasn't really worth the time to mine it. That paradigm has certainly shifted. I'm curious for you and a lot of folks out there who are thinking about this. Are you back in the mining world, any sort of frequency, sir?
Well, I do a little bit of mining for sure, Mark, but I have to, it's so funny that you brought that up because just when Ethereum mining especially becomes its most profitable, wouldn't you know it, that my equipment is pretty much obsolete. So the size of the file that's needed to mine cryptocurrency, you need GPU or graphical cards, processing cards that are greater than 4 gigabytes of memory. Because that's it's called the DAG file. The DAG file is the actual blockchain file that every miner has to download and perform these computational evaluations on it to solve the blockchain, right? So now the file is greater than the equipment that I have. So I've actually been looking at some other cryptocurrencies because unless I have a 6, 8 gig or greater GPU card, we can't mine it right at the time when it's become most profitable. So it's very frustrating. For me, that it kind of happened at this time, as it is with a lot of miners who are now driving the price of NVIDIA and AMD cards because they need to roll up they got to roll up their technology in order to participate. It's interesting. Good profitability, great profitability, but unfortunately, most do-it-yourselfers like myself can't even participate in that game anymore.
Yeah, it's hard. We talked about it a while ago on the show back when the frenzy of mining was going on and you couldn't find a good graphics card to save your life. They were all gobbled up. We were joking about the 6 packs of cards that were flying off the shelves, and even on secondary markets like eBay, we're kind of getting to that world again. The gamers want themselves a little bit of ray tracing, so they want the high-end cards. On top of every miner on the planet wants the high-end, super crazy cards out there. So yeah, they're becoming hard to find again. That's the world we're living in with Bitcoin north of 40,000. You could thank Mr. Musk for all that scarcity out there. Let's break down some of the analytics of what all this craziness is doing to the vol and everything else out there. A lot of this coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. Check them out for yourselves. GVOL.io. Simple, easy URL to remember. You go there, kick the tires, and light the fires. You can try out their stuff for free. You can try out even more. They have a premium version you can get. If you like this data, they're kind of one of the only games in town for this kind of thing. They break it down in some interesting ways, like the 1 hour volatility, for example. That means hour by hour, how the at-the-money vol is changing. And obviously, it changes hour by hour pretty dramatically in the Bitcoin space. Like last show, for example, the hourly volatility of Bitcoin was extremely elevated. It was 105%, but nowhere near the lofty heights it's been to very recently. And it was trading at about a similar level this morning, 102%, until, of course, all this news hit the tape of Musk and Tesla diving in, joining forces, if you will, with Bitcoin. That drove that hourly vol up to about 121.5. So that's pretty juicy. That's pretty much where it was coming into showtime, still around that 120% level. So just give you some frame of reference, listeners, that's pretty juicy for a major trading asset. You don't see most stocks getting north of 60. Even assets like commodities that got pretty juicy for a while. We saw crude oil getting around a 60-odd vol and so on. That's pretty lofty, and then it comes right back in. Very rarely do you see triple digits, let alone sustained triple digits like we've seen in Bitcoin, and then spikes up to 120. We've seen it spike close to 200% not too long ago. That all pales in comparison to recent madness like GameStop, but that was 1,000% implied volatility. That's something myself and probably Bill, who's been on the floor for a while too, never really saw before. So outside of those extreme outliers, this is extreme vol, and yet Musk and Tesla drove it up even more. The 1 hour 30-20 skew as well, breaking down all of the options in that 30 to 20 delta range. Again, if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio, the places to go. Last show was about 13.5. It dropped quite a bit as Musk drove a call frenzy out there, dropped to about 2.5 out there on the Musk news. That's pretty much where it is right now as well. So look at the open interest. One of the fascinating things you can do in crypto, listeners, that you can't do yet in the traditional options market is you can look at open interest hour by hour. How cool is that? How great is that? You can see how the open interest changes. In the traditional world of Apple and Tesla and SPY options, you can only do it once a day. It only updates once a day. In fact, I had a big chat about this just last week with the CEO of the Options Clearing Corporation. Check that out if you want to know maybe what the future will be for hopefully getting open interest to update a little bit faster than once every day in the traditional world of, I mean, it doesn't make sense. You can buy your options. They're executed in microseconds. Why can't the OI be updated a little bit faster than once a day? It's an interesting conversation, but you can do that right now in the new realm, the new frontier that is Bitcoin options. Last show, we had 153,000 contracts open, and it's pretty much a similar level right now, 157,000. So surprising that the Musk frenzy didn't drive more. I expected it to spike more as a result of the news out there, but so far, at least only about 4,000 net contracts increase from last week. Let's look at the notional open interest as well. That's the total value of how many contracts are outstanding. It's not my preferred metric, but people in the Bitcoin space and the crypto world, they love to look at things from a notional value perspective. So we'll indulge them. We'll oblige them here on the show. Last week, the open interest notional outstanding was about right around 6 billion. And this week it has ticked up. It's about 7 billion outstanding out there with the big dog, of course, still Deribit, about 6.1 billion open on Deribit. Then we see number 2, OKEX pulling away. Number 2, 400 million. Number 3, Bit.com, 313 million. And then number 4 is CME. So CME has fallen off a little bit, only 269 million open on their platform. LedgerX, number 5, closing in on CME, 197 million. We'll get to that a little bit later, how we're not seeing the big numbers out there in the CME Bitcoin options. In terms of calls versus puts out there, how is the open interest stacking up? Long term, we know Bitcoin is pretty call heavy, and in general, Bitcoin tends to be call heavy, and that's pretty much the case right now, even though it isn't as super call heavy right now as you might expect. 91,000 contracts open on the call front, 72,000 open. This is on Deribit, by the way, just Deribit. But it probably stacks up pretty similarly on the other venues. Speaking of volume, like we said, it's kind of a quiet week outside of the Musk rampage today. We saw a lot of paper on the tape today, well north of $1 billion worth of notional value on the tape already coming into today's show. And probably by the end of the day, probably a lot more than that. And that's today so far and away the most active day since our last show. Every other day, pretty much last week, was 600 million worth of notional or less. So we're already pretty much 2x that on the tape today, and probably more to come. So well off the recent highs we've seen out there. Like in the end of January, we hit 1.6 billion. Most of last week was well shy of that, and we might hit it today. Let's see how high it gets with the crazy Musk madness. In terms of where people are lining up, where the open interest is in terms of the expiration calendar, it's March. Crypto exit quarterly, and it's still March leading the dance. 56,000 contracts, followed by Feb. Feb's coming in number 2, though. The weeklies in Feb are getting action, and so is the monthly contract. The monthly contract has 36,000. And if you add in some more of the weeklies, I think February overall would probably eclipse March. Just on a month-by-month comparison, end of month Feb versus end of month March, March is leading the dance by about 20,000 contracts. And in terms of where the action is strike-wise, what are people trading strike-wise in terms of Bitcoin options? Remember for a while there, in fact, Bill, on your last show, you were on with us late last year, we were joking about these absurd out-of-the-money calls that were the 36,000 strike in January. It seemed outlandish. spoiler alert, they worked out pretty darn well. And now coming into February here, the Jan has rolled off the board, and we are north of 40,000 again. So probably not surprising that the 40,000 strike is the number one open strike out there with 11,400 contracts, followed by half of that, the 20,000 strike. Number two with about 10,000 contracts open there. So there's quite a dichotomy still of strikes in terms of what people are trading out there. Mr. Bill, any of this kind of come as a surprise to you? Could be the crazy vol coming as a result of Mr. Musk's tweet, the SKEW changes we're seeing, the decent volume today, but light volume maybe the rest of the week, or perhaps the fact that everyone's piling into crazy strikes, or maybe not as crazy as they were. And also, the notion that the last time you were on, we were joking about those 36,000 calls in January, how they seemed like a ridiculous trade. And yet, in hindsight, one of the better trades we've seen in a while, Mr. Bill. A lot to unpack there, sir.
I know, a lot to unpack for sure. I think that, Elon Musk is definitely part of it, but what probably also got the ball rolling was the CEO of MicroStrategy, software company, Michael Saylor. He said that he, a few months ago was already talking about buying Bitcoin. And we saw the conversation and the traction, the content on Twitter, again, pick up in August, September, October of last year. So it's interesting that while the I don't want to call it the FOMO, but like everybody's so excited about Elon Musk and this and his tweets, how it's increased volatility. I totally agree with that. But I'm a contrarian here, and I think it's Bitcoin rallied way more than I expected. I do remember laughing about it back with you when we were talking about these 36,000 calls. It seemed impossible at that time, and here we are, right, and way above. So I'm not surprised. I'm just watching from the outside, and actually in the last 3 weeks, I've probably sold most of our Grayscale Bitcoin Investment Trust positions for our clients because my indicators are negative. And so when I see divergence, I get nervous, right? And maybe I pulled the trigger too soon, but we'll see, right? Until it flips positive, I got to stick with my wingman, as Tom Cruise would say in Top Gun. And so I've got to stick with my indicators, and I'm seeing some of the other smaller digital assets begin to outperform on a percentage basis and on a relative basis Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that has me a little bit concerned. So it's not the first time I've seen divergence and a contradiction in the market, and I just have to play it the way I see it, and what kind of brought me to the table.
I don't think anyone can fault you for dumping some Bitcoin, certainly north of 40,000. The diehard trader in me says, yeah, take your money and run it. Who knows? It could become the next Tesla. It could run to absurd levels, but, it already has run to absurd levels, some might say. So, as the old saying goes, never went broke, taking some winners off the table. Unfortunately, with winners, not so much on the CME options front. The biggest day we saw last week was about 111 contracts. Remember, that's decent size when you factor in the multiple. That's about 555 contracts. But still, it's nowhere near the volume we're seeing going up on venues like Deribit, or even now the Ledger X's and OKEX's of the world and things like that. It's starting to catch up. So interesting time out there. It is a decent time for the futures, even though it was a pretty light week last week as well. And today starting to pick up on the futures front. The futures have always been where the action is over there at CME from a crypto perspective, which is going to make it exciting to talk about the ETH futures in a second. But yeah, last week was a pretty light week on the futures front as well. Most of the days averaging 6,000 to 7,000 contracts. And that looks like the case today until the Musk thing happened. And then it pretty much doubled. Already 14,000 contracts on the tape coming into showtime. So expect a more hot and heavy day out there on the futures front. I won't even bother with the backed volume bots breakdown here on what's going on with the backed futures. Only 1,500 contracts on the tape out there. That alone is down 16%. Not a good sign when Musk and everyone else is out there tweeting they can't make those numbers. But, since we're talking all the other things going on in the futures, there are some new developments out there as well, and I'm excited to get to them. So without further ado, let's keep on exploring the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's break down the altcoin universe. A lot of action happening out here this week, including starting with the top 10 here. This thing is just moving and shaking more than it has in quite some time in the last few months. So usually for the first year and change of this show, this top 10 really didn't change that much. And now we're seeing a lot of moving and shaking week to week. It depends who's tweeting that week what's in the top 10. Number 10, get this, listen, number 10 in the top 10 all coin market cap out here, Dogecoin broke in to the top 10 with a market cap of 10.1 billion. Remember, take these overall market caps with a huge, very tasty grain of salt, because the different venues do different things to inflate their numbers. But the rankings, I do think, have some merit. So that's why we break them down every week. Number 9, Chainlink, just a little bit north of Doge at 10.2 billion. Still laughing at Doge is in the top 10. Started as a meme, a joke about a meme, listeners. And here we are, actual 10 billion worth of value. That's the crypto space in a nutshell. Number 8, Litecoin, 10.7 billion. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. It was a top fiver for a long time. Then it halved and it kind of fell off everyone's radar, it seems like. Number 7, Binance Coin, 11.5 billion. Number 6, our old friend XRP, having a decent week, but still at about 20 billion. And that puts it good for number 6. Number 5, Polkadot, usurping XRP to the tune of about 20.7 billion. Number 4, Cardano, at about 21, almost 22 billion, 21.9 billion. Number 3, Tether, holding firm at number 3, 28.8 billion. Number 2, ETH, 194 point, that's about 195 billion. And the big dog, Bitcoin, closing in on 800 billion. We were joking about this earlier too. Will Bitcoin be a $1 trillion asset someday soon? Well, if the unions of Tesla and Bitcoin can't make it happen, I don't know what can. In fact, that was our poll not too long ago on the network. We asked you guys, what's going to hit the 1T, the 1 trillion market cap level first, Tesla or Bitcoin? I do believe Tesla ever so slightly edged out Bitcoin there, but now that they've come together like this, may have to do that poll again and take a different spin on it. But we got to get to what I plan to be the lead on the show today, Bill. You know, the crypto space tends to do its own thing, but the big news coming into today was the launch of ETH futures on CME. If you recall, back when you and I did that panel over there a few years back, 2-3 years ago at the crypto event here, we had the number 3 person from the CME on that panel with us. At the time, back then, they were hinting about doing ETH futures. So it's been percolating for a while. A lot of people have been waiting for what's the next crypto shoe to drop. With CME, of course, SIBO got into the space and then infamously got out a few months later. CME was in it for the long game, and now they've launched their number 2 contract, the ETH futures. A lot of people, Bill, were worried that this might be a similar trajectory for ETH that we saw with Bitcoin. Of course, remember back in the day when the Bitcoin futures launched, Bitcoin was kind of like the old Roach Motel. You could get in, but it was hard to get out, hence the endless rally we saw in price levels. People were worried that maybe ETH would suffer a similar fate once you had a contract, a product that could be readily shorted, that it might crush the price action out there. But so far, at least, not so much. ETH net on the week up nearly 400 handles, 370 handles. Last week, it was about 1325. And coming into today's show, it was a little bit shy of 1700, 1696. Let's see if it's still, that just ticked over 1700, 1708 right now. So a good run for ETH. So far, it's up 8.5% today. So I guess at least so far, Bill, in the early blush, doesn't seem like the CME futures are going to annihilate ETH the way it started the death knell for Bitcoin, at least for a little while there. What are your thoughts on this new entrant from CME into the number 2 crypto product out there, Bill?
Well, you know, in the 35,000 foot view, I think it's really exciting because, again, we're getting more and more adoption, with cryptocurrencies and digital assets. Bitcoin was designed from its inception to be a electronic digital cash, right? That was in the white paper. But Ethereum is kind of meant to be a distributed and decentralized operating system, right? Where contracts and smart contracts, decentralized finance are operated on. So there's definitely a finance component, but up until recently, with the explosion of decentralized finance, I thought of Ethereum much like a LegalZoom on the blockchain, and I used to describe it as like Microsoft Windows or Apple iOS, but it runs the same way on every machine on the globe. So I've always looked at it from a kind of a technical perspective, like an operating system. And I still think I have my DOS 6.0 disks and floppy disks around here somewhere. But now I see, more and more lending, flash lending, decentralized finance happening. And they do typically, not always, but typically run on an Ethereum blockchain. And Ethereum's going to be taking like Ethereum 2.0 will be coming out shortly, right? Where it's not going to be proof of work, but proof of stake. And it's really interesting. So they're coming out at the right time. It's going to be important for people to hedge these positions in Ethereum. And I'm really excited both for the price action and excited about its, that it's just becoming more and more accepted as an alternative asset class. And that's all we've ever wanted. While we were a little bit early with the call on the Bitcoin ETF and all these things, Mark, the truth is things do move slower when we do need regulation and have a footprint to work with. I mean, I said that years ago. We have to have our regulatory ducks in a row before we can bring this to the masses. And I think we're obviously doing that now.
Yes, you're right. One more product in the listed space. It may be scary, it may be anathema to the folks who come from a pure crypto holder perspective who want, shall we say, the anonymity of everything crypto. But from a asset perspective, and certainly from a large institutional player perspective, a product like this goes a long way to legitimizing these types of products in their eyes and also provide a viable investment vehicle for them. Outside of these products, they have a hard time really investing or trading Bitcoin, and people want more volume out there that benefits everyone at the end of the day, no matter what your viewpoint is on the core issues facing the crypto market. More products that can cater to more people coming in and trading them is a good thing at the end of the day. So far, kind of light on the volume front, Bill. About 250 contracts on the tape coming into showtime. So a slow start, slow burn for ETH. I'll have to go dive into the specs and see if they're doing the same thing with the ETH future that they're doing with the Bitcoin future, which is going for that big, beefy multiplier of 5x. Of course, ETH itself, a fraction of the cost of Bitcoin. So even at a large multiplier, it still won't be anywhere near as meaty of a contract as the Bitcoin. And we were talking a 40,000 Bitcoin price level and then a 5x multiplier on top of that. You see how large that gets pretty quickly. So not the same beast for ETH, but interesting stuff nonetheless. And at least so far, it doesn't seem like the launch of the ETH futures are going to be the death knell that some feared for the price action out there. And ETH, obviously, we're a few years past that launch for Bitcoin futures. The marketplace as a whole for crypto has evolved and grown and matured. There are more vehicles. You can't come out and sell ETH if you want. So it's a little bit different beast than it was a few years ago. So that's probably playing some part of this as well. Let's see how this is all impacting ETH from an overall analytics perspective. The 1 hour vol on our last show was 123%. So ETH was already fairly volatile. It spiked to about 136% between shows, I think, on the impending news of this launch. And then coming into showtime today, it was up a little bit, about 128% from where it was this time last week. So still fairly frothy. 128% is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to volatility. You'd be hard-pressed to find another major asset anywhere close outside of Bitcoin, of course. You got to go really to like some obscure pink sheet biotech stock, to find anything even close to that. And that's not really a major tradable asset. So it's very rare to find a major trading asset north of 100% volatility out there. Decent volume week out there in ETH land as well. Most days about 150 million or notional, if not more, from an ETH options perspective. And a lot on the tape coming into the launch today, 227 million going up out there. So decent volume week out here. Overall, kind of steady, nothing blowing the doors off, no records, but a steady volume every week leading up to the futures launch. It seemed like that was driving some interest. In terms of how these options are breaking down, obviously a bit smaller contract out there, so more numbers from a contract perspective out here on ETH. On Deribit, there are about 723,000 contracts open on the calls and about 592,000 contracts open on the puts. So something similar to what we're seeing shaping up in Bitcoin, where it is call heavy, but it's not all calls. It's not 10-to-1 calls versus puts or anything like that. They're pretty close, but similar levels to what we're seeing out there in Bitcoin land. In terms of open interest, again, we can look at this hour by hour, which is fascinating. And it hasn't changed that much since our last show. Last show, we had about 1.2 million contracts open. So again, it shows you what a different beast ETH is, a cheaper underlying, smaller contract size. You can put a lot more contracts up. 1.2 million contracts outstanding last show and about 1.28 this show. So not a huge change from an open interest perspective. In terms of where the folks are lining up from a contract perspective, in terms of where they like to play these days, it's still March. They love their quarterlies in ETH. 381,000 contracts are open right now in March. Feb is well behind it with 261,000. Now, again, that's just the monthly Feb. If you add in the contracts expiring on the 19th of February and the 12th of February, it gets to become a little bit closer of a story. Actually, it looks like Feb might take the lead if you add that, because the Feb 12th contract has about 100,000 contracts open. So if you add all those together, Feb's going to be number one. But just monthly expiration-wise, it is going to be March, which is the big dog. The strikes are still strange to me out here in ETH. The 400 strike continues to be the number one open strike in ETH, and it continues to grow in open interest. So folks are still actively trading the 400 strike, even though, like I said, coming into Showtime, ETH was at $1,700. So talking a contract, a strike that is far in the rearview mirror from a call perspective or a put. It's a very meaty call, and it's kind of a worthless put, and yet it's trading for size out there. So 88,000 contracts are open right now on the 400 strike. The 480 strike, so a similar question for that one, is still number two at 76,000. So obviously there's some legacy paper there, but you'd expect with the recent run-up, maybe some folks would take that off, but that is clearly not the case. They are holding on to this 400 strike. In fact, it is growing in open interest, which is weird. Then we have the 320 strike, number three, 69,000 contracts. You have to go all the way out to number four to find a relevant quote-unquote strike, the 1600 strike, which is only 100 handles away. That has about 64,000 contracts open. So there are people trading some more sane strikes out there. Just for whatever reason, the paper is still predominantly open on the 400 strike and the 480 strike, and it's growing week to week. So a lot of weird stuff to unpack there, Mr. Bill. I know you like to watch yourself some ETH. Obviously, this new ETH future does change the landscape a little bit, but what are your thoughts as an old school market maker on just the weird strikes that continue to dominate ETH? People are trading contracts that are many, many hundreds of handles in the money yet again there, Bill, and doing so every week in ETH.
You know, Mark, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, when I was on the trading floor, when we were both on the floor, I mean, we had, if you drew a bell curve of option activity and volume, it was your regular normal bell curve. You had your scalpers and people doing at the money, butterflies and conversions, reversals. We were doing the 1-5, the arbitrage between the 100 and the 500. And then you had those guys, about a couple of dozen of them, that were all they did were out of the money put spreads. All they did was out of the money, back spreads by two downside puts and sell one of a higher strike. And then the guys that were doing 1x2 call spreads. I mean, we had so many different people doing so many different spreads. And the truth is, I'm not quite sure how to analyze all the open interest because, again, as I was talking about decentralized finance, people are taking Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're locking it up into smart contracts in order to receive a 6, 7, 8, 10, 12% rate of return on their money because their checking accounts are paying nothing. And so when you use your cryptocurrency as collateral, it's up to the lender to decide how they want to manage the downside risk because that collateral is going to be unlocked if cryptocurrency prices crash. So I'm not sure exactly how to get my arms around these numbers. I think it has to do more with this tremendous expansion in decentralized finance and lending, using cryptocurrencies and how the terms of the contracts are being managed as a risk manager would. So I don't know. I have to say I don't really know yet. For me, this is a work in progress.
It's a work in progress for a lot of people, it seems like, Mr. Bill. Let's move on to some other crypto altcoin that are taking the world by storm. Ripple getting a little bit of a lift after our show last week. It's up about 5, almost 6 cents. So back north of that 40-cent level, about 44.5 cents out there. So not quite circling the bowl the way some folks were lamenting when the SEC investigation was announced. And it seemed like the rising tide is lifting all boats, even though it does seem like there's definitely a ceiling, at least in the recent history, on XRP. Once it gets up to 65 to 75 cents, someone's hitting the exit button there. So that does keep it down, but it's up this week. So XRP bulls should be happy about that. Bitcoin Cash up 65.5 points. Bitcoin SV up about 12, almost 13 points out there. But Mr. Bill, we got to talk. When we're talking altcoin, we got to talk about this, this madness that is Dogecoin. This thing started as a joke. It started as a joke on an internet meme, and it's had huge movements. Again, going back to Musk liking to play with his market moving power. He's been tweeting about it. Other celebrities have been tweeting about it. And just today, it's rallied 37%. Hit a high of 8 and almost 8.085 out there, which is just insanity. So a 37% rally after Musk and others have been tweeting about. What do you make of this? I mean, it's broken into our top 10 today here for the first time since we've been doing this show. What are your thoughts on this quote unquote cryptocurrency that started off as a way to kind of make fun of the entire cryptocurrency universe and now has built up an insane store of value in and of itself, Bill?
Well, I wish I could remember the person who tweeted this next quote I'm about to give you, because I'd love to give them a hat tip. But it pretty much said something like, people can stay retarded longer than people can stay solvent. And so for me, Dogecoin is a complete joke. It's exactly that. This just shows you how absurd Dogecoin is in terms of its comedic value, its meme value. You can't underestimate the value of a good meme. And so here we have, real projects in global changing distributed finance like Uniswap, Maker, Compound, Sushi Swap, Yearn Finance, Curve, Beam, Theta. We have like all these amazing projects. And these guys are not really even getting a decent break. And you've got something like Dogecoin that is making so much news. I mean, I find it's absurd to the point where I feel like I question my own sanity sometimes. As a baby boomer who doesn't understand what's going on, because I see no reason for Doge to be going where it is, unless people just want to own it for the sake of owning it. Maybe it's a badge of honor and courage, but I totally don't get it. It makes no sense to me when there's so many good. It's like buying GameStop or AMC Theaters when you have all these other beautiful companies in the S&P 500. I don't know. It's crazy.
And that makes me feel better for you there, Bill. If you understood all this or claimed to, I'd be more worried about you out there, because you're right. That's the times we're living in. If you can make sense of all this, the GameStop, the AMCs, the Doges, if that all makes sense to you, then perhaps 2021 is the year for you. Yeah, Doge in the top 10 and doesn't look like it's shown any signs of giving up anytime soon. You know who else hasn't given up, Bill, is our audience, and they're full of some thoughts, including some thoughts for you. So let's get to it. A little bit of their crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to Crypto Questions. Before we get to all of the people chiming in on the live show here in a second, Mr. Bill, as you can imagine, you've got the hodlers out coming for you. But before we get to that, we had an interesting poll on our network this past week, and you just kind of mentioned it in terms of what's been going on there. So I'd like to get your thoughts as a long-time experience, options market maker. You've seen a few crashes and mad periods come and go in your time over there on the SIBO. Our poll last week was, there have been many debacles that left lasting impacts on the options market. The 87 crash, long-term capital, the dot-com crash, great financial crisis, just to name a few. There have been many. Should we add this GameStop frenzy to that list? And our poll, Bill, was yes, we're living in a post-GameStop world, or no, it's a tempest in a teapot. It started off pretty strongly with yes. As the poll went on, it kind of trended a little bit more towards even. By the end of it, it was pretty even, about 54% for yes and 46% for a no. But you've been around the space for a while. You've seen a lot of knee-jerk reactions to insane market developments and the sometimes flurry of bad regulation that can result from these kind of things. So I know it's not exactly a crypto story, even though there is a lot of overlap between the GameStop players and the crypto markets out there, the crypto traders out there. But what are your thoughts on the lasting impact of this short squeeze frenzy on our markets? Are we, as we said, living in a post-game world, or is this kind of a tempest in a teapot, sir?
Well, I think it's a tempest in a teapot for the average retail investor and for the Reddit speculator. But where I do think that this is a game changer is the fact that that the concept of short selling and the percentage of shares above, the floating number of shares versus the number of shares outstanding of a company. I mean, GameStop apparently had maybe 140% over its, the number of shares outstanding because it was short interest. And you and I have both dealt with the hard to borrow issue, failed to deliver, how we had to adjust the call price of a combo lower and the put price higher so that we could compensate for the negative rebate on shares of stock. So what I think has happened is that, Patrick Byrne, who was the former CEO of Overstock, he was talking about this short selling issue back in 2006, maybe 2005. begging the SEC to do something because short sellers were coming in and raiding his company and just pounding overstock shares. And then I think even that conversation of the hard to borrow issues may have even happened in the 03-04 issue. Certainly with there was a decision by the Dole Pineapple Company where they tried to do a corporate action, and the number of shares that were tendered were like 35% higher than the number of shares outstanding. So I think if it's done anything, it's done something to improve the conversation on a regulatory front to see exactly what's going on with the number of shares outstanding of these companies and how short sellers are, I'm not going to say taking advantage of the situation, but just how short sellers are kind of working in the background that affect public markets, which we need to have integrity. We need to have trustworthiness in these markets. So that's what I think is the good side, is the silver lining behind what apparently might be a dark cloud for everybody else.
Well, speaking of said dark clouds here, sir, folks are listening. Like I mentioned, I was joking, but when you dare question either Tesla or crypto, they come out in force. And some folks who are listening to the show right now, taking, shall we say, issue with some of your comments earlier, Bill, how this makes you concerned about both Tesla and Bitcoin now that they've kind of come together like Voltron to form this new entity. Richard Bruce, listening to the show, chiming in, says, Tesla holds cash on the balance sheet, and now they hold some Bitcoin. So he says he's not sure what the issue is. One is fixed in supply, aka Bitcoin. The other is US dollar, which is being printed at an exponential rate. The Bitcoin sits there and life goes on. He says this does not affect the core Tesla business. And Cash Inco also listening, chiming in, saying, as Elon says, Tesla is a collection of 12 different startups. Crypto looks like a new division on that collection, followed by a bunch of unicorn emojis. So, Mr. Bill, what are your thoughts on some of the hodlers saying this is a good thing, sir? Taking the counterpoint to your point.
And again, I'm going to tell you, I've been a contrarian my whole life. Sometimes it works for me. Sometimes it works against me. But I would just say that from an article I think I read in Bloomberg last week, that Volkswagen sells more electric vehicles than Tesla does. Tesla clearly is not an electric car company, but it's a regulatory arbitrage company that's masking itself as an EV. And yeah, it's a cool looking car, and I would love to own one. But in terms of the revenues, and it's almost $1 trillion company, it's not that they can't afford to hold it. That's fine, and I'm sure that they hold other currencies and businesses that they do overseas. And again, I don't know that much about Tesla. I've got to be honest with you, other than its market cap versus its business model, right? And so for me, it's not that they can't afford not to owning it. I just think philosophically, it just doesn't resonate well with me. Yeah, sure, it makes sense for General Motors to lend money to the people that buy their cars. Okay, I get it. But Bitcoin, it would make more sense to me that PayPal owns Bitcoin because they're expanding in the world of cryptocurrency. And it makes sense to me that JP Morgan might even hold it because they're going to be internalizing their order flow to like $60 trillion a day in commerce. All that makes sense. But you don't need to hold Bitcoin if you're going to be accepting it for payments for new cars or in lease payments. So I don't know. I just maybe sometimes I like to be a contrarian just for the sake of being a contrarian. I just don't like the way this smells to me. That's all. It just doesn't smell right.
It's kind of hard if you've been on the trading floor for any length of time. It does beat a certain cynicism into you over time. And it's kind of hard to see things like that. I'm with you, Mr. Bill, and not have some of those flags go up, because we have seen maybe not this exact thing before, but similar, shall we say, frenzies come up. And it is interesting. Of course, the hodlers are going to come out. They're the new gold bugs, Bill. It used to be if you talked anything negative about gold, they come for you. Now it's the hodlers, and now it's the Tesla folks, and they've joined forces. So it's going to be coming out. Sure, once this show hits the network, there will be many more comments like that. But a lot of folks are also just chiming in, Bill. Pinnacle Quant saying we're seeing lots of interest in Doge. We'd love to see a Doge futures product. Well, you got your wish here, Pinnacle Quant, because as of today, like I said, we don't have Doge futures, but we have ETH futures. And who knows if Doge continues this, some might say, absurd price trajectory. Then who knows? Maybe the CME's third product on the futures front will be a Doge future. I just like saying that out loud because it is hilarious. But it took them a few years, shall we say, to go from Bitcoin to ETH. So I think it will take at least a few more years for them to go from ETH to Doge. Freaking not saying, what about Dogecoin? Yeah, we're all on it. We talked about it. It's obviously outside of the oxygen that has been taken up by Tesla and Bitcoin. What oxygen remains in the crypto space is going on about Dogecoin these days. We had a comment earlier on one of our shows, I think from a recent show last week or so. We were talking in general. Some people are thinking this feels kind of top heavy, which goes along the line with what Bill was saying earlier. And Ed Hale chimed in saying, yes, he agrees. Bitcoin, Tesla, EVs, and cloud sticks being the new AOL, Yahoo, Cisco, etc. He didn't know. He wrote this before the Tesla news today, so he didn't know how right he was that Tesla and Bitcoin in the same sentence again. He says these PEs are insane, though people keep saying it's different this time due to low rates. I'm just not comfortable personally. So it sounds like, Bill, he's echoing what you're saying at these levels. You know, it certainly isn't insane to want to take some things off at these levels. These valuations are high, certainly compared to recent past out there. And the outlook is uncertain. So if you're not comfortable at these levels, there's no shame in taking some off. As I said before, you never went broke taking a winner. You may have left some money on the table, but hey, you're not going to go broke that way. Let's wrap it up with some positivity here, Mr. Bill. This comes from Merpetual. Merpetual says he's become a big fan of Genesis Vol through the show. He says, enter Genesis Vol by way of you guys over there at Options in the Crypto Rundown. I became exposed to a whole nother ball game of Bitcoin and ETH derivatives and complex data aggregated onto a semi-free platform. He says these at Genesis Vol guys have great, interesting data for Bitcoin options. Well, glad you're liking it there, Merpetual. Take your chance if you haven't done so already, listeners. Check them out for yourselves at gvol.io. It's pretty simple. If you like the stuff we're talking about here and you're listening to this show, so I'm guessing that you do. If you want to take the same level of analysis that you like to do with, let's say, SPY options or Apple options, or anything, you want to look at the SKEW and the vol, open interest, everything else, you can do that on a platform like GVol. So check it out for yourself over there, gvol.io. And thanks for Merpetual and everyone else took the time to comment and chime in and participate on the show here this week. We love you all, even if your opinions are contrary to what we're saying here on the show. We love you all. All right, everybody, that music means we come to the end of an interesting sojourn through the world of all things crypto. I got the feeling now that Musk and Tesla have officially joined the game. We've not heard the last of any of this here for the foreseeable future, so keep checking out Crypto Rundown. Comes out every Monday. It's still kind of the only game in town in terms of a program that actually talks about the derivative side, the growing, some might say exploding world of crypto derivatives. So stay tuned every week. Remember, if you like this show, there's about a dozen other shows on the network for you to check out. So wherever you're getting this show, make sure you subscribe to the full network. And if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing. It does help new folks. And there are a lot of them out there these days. Discover the network in these troubled times. And before we go, Mr. Bill, if folks agree with you, maybe they want to play counterpoint with you, or maybe they just want to learn more about what you're up to over there at CENACLE and Grayscale, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, they can visit our website at CENACLEcapital.com. That's CENACLE, CENACLEcapital.com. Or give us a call at 847-686-4800. And again, we're trying to combine our old school trading experience with the new world of cryptocurrencies. And, you know, we're also a accredited investment fiduciary. So perhaps that might explain some of my prudence in the conversation. And so I would appreciate anybody who wants to talk about it or chat. I'm here.
There you go. Check them out over there. CENACLE Capital Management. You can also give them a follow over there on the old Twitters at CENACLE Capital, CENACLE. So you can debate back and forth the relative merits of Tesla and Bitcoin and Dogecoin and all the other fun stuff out there. And on behalf of Mr. Bill and our friends over there at gvol.io, aka Genesis Volatility, and indeed myself, I thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for voting in our polls, for listening live, for rating and reviewing, for sharing your opinions with us. We love to hear from all of you. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Interview Tuesday, Education Wednesday on Wednesday, Thursday, Option Block and TWIFO, Friday, Vol Views. Then it all kicks off again next week with another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This episode is sponsored by Demand Derivatives, a startup futures exchange and clearinghouse trading the world's major assets in a creative new way. You already trade on an exchange. Here is your chance to own one. Before they approach large strategic partners for funding, the pioneering team at Demand Derivatives launched a crowdfunding portal so that regular traders have the chance to buy shares. Learn more and become a part of this revolutionary fintech project now at demandderivatives.com/crowdfunding. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.